So you know about indie development, right? They're devoted creators that, although they don't have the strongest budget, are filled with passion and can even overthrow AAA games or build their own cult following depending on the developer. But what if I told you about an indie developer that chances are you've seen the games of, but despite that I've never heard the name of before? A developer who I've always considered to be one of my favorite indie devs, a developer who's talked at New York Game Center and even freaking Stanford, had Markiplier play 2 of their games, and yet is barely talked about. Well, sit down and get ready to throw all the love and support you can muster, because I'm gonna make you do it. We've been too negative on this channel my last 2 uploads, so today's wholesome day, because we're talking about the underrated indie genius of Nicky Case. So who is Nicky Case? Well, there's 2 games of theirs that have blown up that you might have known them from. First was their most popular, a game they made when they were 13 called The Game, which blew up on Newgrounds and Markiplier played. The other is We Become What We Behold, which is a lot more in line with what most of their games are about. This one being about the harm of clickbait, exaggeration, and negativity bias in the news. You start as a journalist doing basic journalism, but it ramps up more and more as your headlines become more and more negative over time. After taking one bad day of a square and generalizing them, you bolster the paranoia between circles and squares until...
It's destiny! Uh-oh. Oh!
Yeah. But surprisingly, I didn't know them from either of those 2 games. I mean, I watched videos of those 2 games, yeah, but I didn't know Nicky Case made them until after. You see, a long time ago, in the far-off distant lands of 2017, I was watching starter videos when in the recommended section, I found a video from Matt Shea that caught my interest.
Hello everyone and welcome to the evolution of trust. So let's start the game.
Now I've always been pretty enamored with this game. It delves into the prisoner's dilemma and game theory. No, not that kind. And portrays social science, which is what all their games are for the most part about. People and their little weird shenanigans and what's going on in their heads. You can even see their iconic art style being used both in this game and We Become What We Behold, which is what I talked about earlier. We start off with the true story of World War I, where the armies got out of their trenches and despite specific orders not to, they came together to bury their dead, exchange gifts, and play games alongside their enemy. Contrasted in this day and age of mistrust, the game follows the idea of game theory and why things have become so distrustful. Think of it more as a thought experiment simulation than a game. But even so, I was enamored with this thing when I was younger. Basically, in front of you is a machine where if you insert a coin, the other player gets 3. If you both cooperate, you can both get 2. However, if you don't put a coin in and they do, you can get all 3 while they're left holding the bag. This is a simplistic version of the prisoner's dilemma, but essentially your best option in this scenario would be to cheat, because either way, you'd quote-unquote win. You'd either get 3 coins or get nothing, whereas cooperating would give you a worse reward and a greater cost. However, in an environment where you interact multiple times, that's not the case. If you want more coins in the long term, it's better to trust. There's lots of different strategies here demonstrated by different hats. And it even tests other aspects like changing the reward to a zero-sum game or making mistakes. But in short, you want repeat interactions, possible win-wins, and low miscommunication if you want to build trust in relationships. Now, I sped through the game with my explanation, so be sure to try it out. It's a web browser game, so you can play it with the link below without having to download anything. There's also another similar game called The Madness of Crowds, which tackled how social circles change our perceptions and views of the world, particularly groupthink and the spread of misinformation. Though most of my memories with that game was me connecting all the little guys here into one and then cutting them all free. I think I tried to connect everyone to everyone, but there's just so many. They have a whole website with their blog, videos, and other little doodads that they made over the years. This is also where they link all of their games, or as they prefer to call them, explorable explanations. They even have a whole website dedicated to those, in which other people can even create and share their own of that genre. There's a lot to explore here, and I'll link their website in the description as well, but I'll go over a bunch of Nicky's games back to back before going over the one that I deem to be their biggest masterpiece of all time. A game so great that inspired me to make this video. Alright, let's get into it. Nothing to Hide is a puzzle game that's essentially an anti-stealth game. Although they aren't making this game anymore, it's very creative in its lighting, using their own specially made sight and light system. Its ideas are pretty neat, its puzzles are nicely made, and it has these themes around the lack of privacy, especially when it comes to family members of public figures, as well as the lack of privacy on the internet as a whole. Pretty good for an hour-long demo. The Parable of the Polygons is a collaboration with VHeart, yes, that VHeart, and talks about segregation through the lens of game theory, which although that may sound off-putting, is actually really fun to doink around with, and explains the modern day effects of redlining pretty well. It's adorable, is just a minute-long cute game that you're supposed to share around. Basically, you play through these 3 stages as quickly as possible, and you unintentionally create an I love you message. Very wholesome. Neurotic Neurons is probably the most blatantly educational of the bunch. It talks about how neurons work and how you can build habits, as well as why exposure therapy works in fixing fears. And lastly, Fireflies shows how the light of fireflies work on an internal clock system that nudges each other forward until they are in sync, and lets you play around with them. Neat. Now, all those games are nice and all, but there's one that's a little different than the rest. Most of these games I mentioned are either one, half article and half game, or two, just really short experiences. But this one is not only its own game with multiple choices and endings, but captures the same feeling that the evolution of trust captured in my heart so long ago, in the same way that We Become What We Behold captured in so many others. Alright, I'll stop being vague. Here's the game. Now pause here. Now in a second I'm going to be talking about this game, but this game is built in a way that can only really be experienced by playing. So what I want you to do is go and play the game and then come back. I know a lot of you are probably watching this on your phone or listening in the background while you're doing other things, but I'm being completely serious when I say pause this video right now, go onto your computer, play Adventures with Anxiety, and then come back. It's 30 minutes long, took me even less, plus another game where you just play it on your browser. But I am begging you, play this game because me explaining it won't do it justice and won't capture the feelings that this masterpiece of a game gave me when I first played it back in 2019. Play it now or lose everything. You're back? Good. Let's talk a little bit about what you just experienced. Adventures with Anxiety is a choose-your-own-adventure game where you play as this person's anxiety anthropomorphized as this red wolf. This alone is brilliant in that the only color that you see in this game is the red of anxiety, while the rest of the world and characters are portrayed in a monochromatic gray. The fact that anxiety is portrayed as a wolf in particular is also interesting in that wolves are often a symbol of courage, whilst this one is the exact opposite of that, being anxious. On top of that, in some folklore, particularly Norse mythology, wolves swallow people whole, particularly Odin, kind of like how anxiety can swallow us whole if we let it, though I could be looking too hard into that connection. There's also the idea of the big bad wolf, which is referenced multiple times throughout. Throughout the game, you are protecting your human by warding them of the dangers of the world, which is initially done in a jovial tone over things like white bread. It's done in this intentional way in which it feels like something out of a cheesy PSA until it takes a more realistic turn. Right when we expect a cheesy message of just breathe in and out, she instead pulls out a bottle of a very illegal tequila, as it goes down the route of replacing anxiety with danger, much like how it could be in the real world, as well as how we become more susceptible to manipulation and bad habits when we are desperate. Another noteworthy thing is that this game acknowledges fear. Remember that at the start of the game it tells us to pick what best matches our anxiety, and when we first enter the party they talk about us, in a vague enough way that you might think it's just random dialogue, but still have that inner suspicion that they're talking about you, just like with real anxiety. When we get to the final party, we, or more accurately our human, has used alcohol as a supplement for anxiety to the point that they no longer have rational thoughts. We're told right out of the gate that there are two endings. One is really bad. And so when we start making choices here, we're feeling the tension and the pressure that our wolf is feeling, because there's been enough breaks of the norm of how these stories go that we plausibly feel like our human could die here. And if we fail, we get a pretty dark scene with screaming, ambulance sounds, a shaky screen, and a deathly silent hospital bed. And although we don't die, the game acknowledges whatever happened. We can see the final scene with either broken legs or not. Our guard wolf gets a cone of shame for failing to protect them. They talk about what happened, and even the aftermath feels tense, but we made it. In the end, we live, and we come to a realization that following your anxiety is just as bad as avoiding it and seeing it as the enemy. And mind you, all of this is done with astonishing pacing, dialogue, and writing. We go from a light and campy PSA to a near-death experience to the middle. Something that admits it's cheesy, but still real and genuine, and tries to give you advice based on your own fears and your own experience. It could have easily gone the easy route and just been like, oh, just take some deep breaths, or oh, just go to therapy. But instead it makes a flexible experience that tries to bend itself to the player's personal experiences and give them genuine advice. Heck, it even cites actual websites and journals for everything it talks about. And while doing all of that, it doesn't pretend it knows the answer either. It doesn't pretend to be a supplement to therapy, or by playing this flash game that'll solve all of your problems, but shows you a good place to start and puts things into perspective so that you can learn what you're afraid of and where you might want to go from there. This is why they're a genius. Nicky Case made this game not as a lecture, but as a mental health exercise disguised as a game, built with the very same feelings and experiences that they themselves dealt with and used to power this game. And this is something you find with a wide majority of their games. Although when I explain each of them aloud, you can tell they're educational. When you play them, you absorb absorb and take lessons from it without feeling like it's one of those edutainment games you were forced to play back in high school. Although some are more obvious, like with the evolution of trust or neurotic neurons, others can be played to where you don't realize you got something out of it until after. Everything they make is made in this respectful manner where you don't feel like you're being talked down to, you don't feel like you're clicking through a slideshow they have to write notes on later. It's done this way where you can take in the lessons and properly enjoy and remember them without feel like you're being forced to learn at gunpoint where the game comes as an afterthought. It's edutainment done right. And although they haven't made any games in a few years, they're still working on some equally neat stuff. I think their most upcoming project is a 3-part comic series called The AI Safety for Fleshy Humans, which is exciting considering how anxious we all are about AI right now, especially as artists in the world. And knowing Nicky Case is sure to be a fantastic read when it comes out, but until then, go give them some love. They have a YouTube channel, I'll link it below and in the top comment, so I demand that you give Nicky the feel-good vibes like they gave me. I'll also be linking their Ko-Fi in the case any of you guys want to throw some money their way to support their future projects, and their website, seeing as I didn't talk about everything on there. Like I said, nearly everything on there is a worthwhile read, and my summaries certainly did not do them as much justice as playing them yourself would. Anywho, I think that's all I have for this time around. Go show Nicky some love, and I'll see you all next time. Peace!